I wanted to take some time and look at why we got President Donald Trump. I want to preface this by saying that I'm very glad we did, and I'm very happy with the way that he's governing. But a lot of conservative and liberal pundits out there like to use the phrase, "this is why we got Trump." And every time I hear that, I think about the fact that there was a lot that was leading up to Trump, and there is definitely a reason that we have him in our executive branch right now. President Trump has faced some of the fiercest opposition from every angle that you can imagine, starting from the first time that he came down that escalator in 2015. But some of the fiercest opposition that he had came from his Democratic contenders and his predecessor especially. I'd like to do a series on my Saturday episodes analyzing his predecessors and his competing candidates. Three of the big ones, and I'm thinking very hard about doing a fourth episode about one of the people that were on his side, because it was one of the first people that I supported when he talked about running for president himself. Today I'd like to start this series by talking about former First Lady, former Secretary of State, and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Rodham Clinton. I have some facts that I'd like to add to this, but for the most part I'd like this series to be what I saw and what motivated me as a person who was politically active to go and vote for somebody who had no political experience whatsoever. The Hillary story is probably one of the most interesting stories in all of politics, and I've been watching it for almost as long as I've been paying attention to politics. While I was in middle school when I first started to understand what politics was and how it worked. Even back then, Hillary Clinton was assumed to be the upcoming first female president. If not Hillary, then her daughter Chelsea, who was talked about as a future Democratic frontrunner. As soon as the Clinton presidency was over, the Clintons moved to New York, and Hillary immediately started running for Senate in that state. And she got the bid almost immediately as well. New York City has always been a very left-leaning place, and Hillary had the name recognition that would put her easily at the top of the ticket, especially following a very successful presidency that her husband had. Her husband, at the time, had absolutely no intention or really incentive to ever run for anything again. So in order to keep the political success of the Clinton machine in office, the people of New York were more than happy to elect Hillary in to represent them in the United States Senate. And that was where Hillary started to get her political feet wet. Now, Hillary had a very successful Senate career. She's got a good voting record behind her, and throughout her Senate career, throughout the Bush presidency, the Senate and Congress in general continued to become bluer and bluer as time went on. But it also gave Hillary a name recognition that would have faded into obscurity had she not been active in politics as she went along. It was that very name recognition that set Hillary up to attempt to run for president herself in 2008 for the first time. All the factors were going correctly for her. It was almost assumed at that point that the next president was going to be a Democrat. The United States people were starting to get war fatigue from the ongoing Iraq War, and it was very commonplace for people to blame that war on President Bush, who was in office at the time. The war in Iraq, of course, was supposed to be the carryover, and George W. Bush finishing his father's job. In 2007, almost immediately at the beginning of primary season, Hillary Clinton announced that she was planning on running for president. I saw on budding Facebook how many of my friends decided that they wanted to support her. Everybody was with Hillary at the time. I can't sit here and tell you that in 2008, had Hillary got the nod and become the Democrat nominee to run against John McCain, that I wouldn't have voted for her. I grew up in a union household, and Hillary Clinton ran as a very, as it's called today, blue dog Democrat. Her platform was all about unions and workers' rights, and that rang to me because of my upbringing. But somewhere along the way on the campaign trail, Hillary's campaign got swallowed up and nearly ignored by an enigmatic young senator named Barack Obama. Now, I'm going to talk about Barack Obama in a couple weeks and the role that his presidency and policies played in putting President Trump into the Oval Office today. But right now, I just want to talk a little bit lightly on his policies and how they affected Clinton and how they essentially denied her the presidency in 2008. While Hillary talked about workers' responsibility and creating good jobs and union jobs in order to get people through the recession that was looming and booming at the time, Barack Obama had a message that resonated with people that were my age, young in college, and just starting to get out into the workforce. And that was a lot of free stuff. Barack Obama never talked about lowering taxes like Hillary did. He didn't talk about taxes at all. What he talked about was a forgiveness of student debt and free health care for everybody, no matter what, and didn't really talk about the cost. At the time that most of the people at my age who were voting for Obama especially were coming into the world, they were starting to wonder how they were going to pay off their student debts and finding jobs that didn't offer any sort of health care because the market was flooded with workers and didn't have enough jobs to support them. At the time that Obama was coming into office, and especially when he was campaigning, I understand this because this was my situation. The only effective career was military. It was the only way that you knew that you were going to get health care and you knew that your family was going to be taken care of. Everything else at the time was kind of a gamble, and especially with the healthcare market being what it was. It wasn't like you were going to work anymore like it was before Obama during the Bush years, where you knew that you were going to get health care offered to you by your employer no matter what. That was a carryover from the economic booms of the 80s and 90s, and that economic boom was finished by 2007 during the campaign. Therefore, the planks of Hillary's platform, which 12 years earlier worked like a charm with a president who was in the process of being impeached, just couldn't fall on the right ears and couldn't find the right voters that supported those ideals. Why would you vote for workers' rights and higher wages through a union when you've got another guy over here that's offering you free stuff? Ironically, it was the free stuff aspect which chased me away from the Democrat Party. I mentioned in a blog article, which I will link specifically in the description below, that my change in heart from Democrat to Republican came when a friend of mine, just getting out of high school, sent me a text message, seeming frantic, that said, "What's going to happen if Obama gets elected? I don't want to give away half my money for other people." It was at that point that I started researching Barack Obama's platform and realizing how much more I would have preferred to have Hillary as the president than Obama, and started to realize that the Democrat Party was going in a direction that I could not follow at the time. Now, Clinton and Obama were mortal enemies going through the campaign trail, and they were pulling very dirty punches against each other. And in true fashion, Obama appointed former presidential candidate John Kerry to be his Secretary of State. There was no surprise there, and Kerry was actually possibly at the time the best candidate for the job. But the surprising part to the American people was 4 years later, Obama decided to pull Kerry's tenure as Secretary of State and put Clinton in his place. The two mortal enemies had found a way to work together, and the whole thing triggered a very suspicious air around the Obama presidency and around Clinton herself. Even before Obama appointed Hillary to be the Secretary of State, the Democratic Party already knew and assumed that Hillary was going to be the next Democratic presidential candidate. I remember in 2012, right after Obama walked away from Romney with a victory, A series of Democrats, as Facebook friends, started to post that now we had 4 more years before all the racists in the country turned into sexists. Ironically, I think it's that Facebook post that doomed the Democrat Party, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about Obama. But the world should have assumed by that point that Hillary was going to be the nominee, and sure enough, she was. In 2016, Hillary expectedly announced her candidacy for the President of the United States, and she started talking immediately like the Blue Dog Democrat that she was in 2008, or so she claimed to be. There was a lot of commentary in the punditry and in the alternative media that said that this was easily the most winnable election for Hillary Clinton at the time, especially considering the Republican field that was coming up. The top 3 people on the Republican nominee side had no political experience, and we've never had a president in our country's history that had no political experience like that. So again, it was assumed that somebody with no political experience was going to run against a political mainstay and lose to her. Hillary began her campaign as the typical Blue Dog Democrat that we expected. But something amazing happened as the political campaign was going on. Hillary started losing ground to a Vermont senator who was independent, who didn't even run for Senate as a Democrat, and yet the people, the generation behind me, were swarming to his every word and worshiping on the ground that he stood. Yes, it looked like Hillary Clinton was going to lose to a more socialist platform again. But the Democrat National Committee could not allow that to happen. They owed Clinton too much money. There's documentation that the Democrat National Committee was deep into debt and the Clinton Foundation bailed them out. The DNC turned around and stabbed Sanders in the back. That's something I'm going to talk about when I talk about the Sanders candidacy and his campaign for president as well. But as Sanders was walking away with more and more votes, Clinton realized that if she did not change her platform, people were not going to vote for her anyway. The majority of the Democrat Party in America wanted a more socialist and progressive candidate for president than Hillary came to be at the onset. That was why they rejected her in 2008, and that was why they appeared to be rejecting her in 2016. So Hillary changed her platform completely. Her planks going from union workers and workers' rights into free college, free health care, and various other social programs designed to make it so people had to depend on the government in order to get by. There are a lot of talking points that surround Clinton and what cost her the presidency of the United States. The email scandal, the Benghazi scandal, Fast and Furious, and just about every other scandal that came through the Obama administration that the media chose to ignore at the time and the alternative media turned and ran with. But in complete honesty, I do not believe that is what happened to Hillary Clinton. Towards the end of her candidacy the second time, Hillary had such a massive shift in platform and plank that I don't believe the American people really knew what they were voting for. And yes, you will hear the people out there that say the Clintons are corrupt, and I believe that is true. But so have been other presidents in the past who have glowing records in the history books today. And there are other people out there that will tell you from the start to the finish that it was entirely the email scandal that condemned Hillary Clinton's candidacy. And I don't necessarily believe that's true either. The bottom line comes out to the fact that if you're going to put your faith in an executive for 4 years after spending 8 years putting more power into the executive branch, you should know what it is that you are voting for. I will admit that I was wary to vote for Donald Trump because as a non-politician I had no idea what I was getting into. And as I've mentioned before, Donald Trump was a big-time Democrat when he was in New York City and had donated to Gillibrand and Schumer in years past. But Trump had a simple message, and his platform stayed the same throughout the majority of his candidacy. And that is something that people seem to resonate too. The people of America knew what they were going to get when they elected a reality TV star to the presidency. There are arguments out there that they're not getting what they expected either. In fact, it appears that President Trump is turning a lot of power away from the executive branch and putting a lot of pressure back onto the legislation in order to get laws that are concrete rather than laws that can be flicked away with the flick of a pen. And that may be the detail that did Hillary in. I spent the entire 2016 campaign analyzing Hillary ads and Hillary campaign promises and how they changed throughout. I can't say that what I got now with Trump is what I expected at the time, but I can tell you for certain that by the time that November of 2016 came around, I had no idea what our country would have been like in a year under a Clinton presidency, because I had no idea what she was going to stand for each week and what she was going to carry into the presidency. Really, on the outset of it, it looks like Hillary was trying to immortalize herself as the first female president. In office, she would have never had to get anything done at all, but she would still be living on forever in history books as the first woman to take the Oval Office. Nearing the end of her life, it's really easy for me to point the finger and say that was her defining force. Everybody's going to die, but very few people are going to live forever. People like Martin Luther King and people like Rosa Parks, who stood up and bucked the system and changed the way things operate. And I think Hillary was looking for that. It really felt like she was going to do anything and everything in order to become president. All that told me was that her vote was for sale, and her executive orders as well were for sale. And that's not something that I want in a president. With the immigration thing going on right now, there's a lot of talk about Trump giving away his vote because of kowtowing to political pressure. But one thing that I haven't heard since 2016 is the fact that Trump gave away his flick of a pen to a special interest group or a massive donor. I don't think that would have been the case if Hillary would have been in office. One of the scariest things that I took out of the Clinton presidential campaign was the idea that we needed to keep a non-politician away from the presidency of the United States. As I mentioned in my Freshman Politicians video, one of the most important things of the Trump presidency is that it would make it okay for non-politicians to start running for Senate seats, representative seats, and local seats. Unfortunately, that's something that is plaguing the 2018 midterms and appears that it's going to be plaguing the 2020 presidential election as well. The Democrats that are running are largely cited as not having any sort of political platform, and unfortunately, from the few ads that I see because I have cut the cord, I think the punditry is right. The entire Democrat platform is to oppose Trump. We're going to impeach him, we're going to oppose him, and we are going to get rid of him. And I don't want to hear about the opposition entirely. I want to hear what it is that you're going to do for the American families, how you're going to boost the economy, how you're going to bring my taxes down, what you're going to do to eliminate existing laws that are choking out my life. Government officials work for me. I don't want to hear what they want to oppose. I want to hear what they're going to do with my tax dollars. That's what I'm paying them for. That was something that Clinton definitely did not have. What did you think of the Clinton campaigns, both in 2008 and in 2016? Would you have voted for Clinton in 2008? Would you have voted for Clinton in 2016 had she kept her original platform? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.